Have you ever wondered why the people who hurt you the most are the ones you can't walk away from? It's not weakness. It's not love. It's something darker, something wired deep inside your mind, something you never realized was controlling you. When you grow up learning that love is something you must chase, prove, or survive, your nervous system quietly absorbs that lesson and carries it into adulthood. You don't realize it, but your body stores emotional memories far more deeply than your mind does. So when you meet someone who gives you affection one moment and pulls away the next, it feels strangely familiar. Not comfortable, just familiar. And familiarity can feel like safety, even when it hurts you. The attachment you feel to someone who harms you is not a conscious decision. It's a biological and psychological imprint formed long before you understood what relationships were supposed to look like. Your nervous system becomes trained to expect a certain emotional climate, maybe chaos, inconsistency, or emotional distance. And over time, that becomes your normal. So when someone treats you in a way that mirrors that old climate, your body reacts with recognition, not fear. It's like touching a bruise. It hurts, but the pain feels known. This is why people can walk away from healthy love, but cling to toxic love. Healthy love feels unfamiliar. Predictability feels suspicious. Stability feels like a trick. But emotional chaos? That feels like home, because your early blueprint of love was written in instability. Pain becomes the thread that ties your past to your present, and without realizing it, you start chasing relationships that reenact the unfinished emotional story of your childhood. At a deeper level, trauma bonds form when affection is unpredictable. The person hurting you gives you attention in erratic bursts, an apology here, a compliment there, a moment of softness after days of coldness. This pattern creates a chemical cycle in your brain: stress, relief, stress, relief. And because the relief feels so powerful, your mind begins to crave it like an addiction. You start believing that the only person who can soothe your pain is the person who caused it. That's how the bond strengthens. Most people think they stay in harmful relationships because they're naive or weak. But trauma attachment has nothing to do with weakness. It's a survival adaptation. When you grow up in unstable emotional environments, you learn to stay hyper-attuned to subtle shifts in mood and behavior. Your brain becomes skilled at reading danger, not at recognizing peace. So in adulthood, consistency feels boring or unreal, while emotional volatility feels meaningful and intense. The nervous system confuses high emotional activation with love. This is also why you end up trying to fix or heal the person hurting you. Deep inside, there's a child who still believes that if they can finally earn love from someone emotionally unavailable, it will retroactively repair every moment they were overlooked or rejected in the past. You're not seeking a partner. You're seeking closure to an old wound. And until you become aware of that, you mistake attachment for affection and trauma for chemistry. Understanding this isn't about blaming your past. It's about freeing your present. Once you recognize that your attachment is rooted in old emotional patterns and biological conditioning, you begin to see that your reactions are not flaws, they're learned responses. And anything learned can be unlearned. The first step is awareness, realizing that the pull you feel towards someone who hurts you is not love. It's your nervous system repeating what it thinks is safe. When you finally see this clearly, the relationship loses its spell. You start questioning the moments you used to romanticize. You start seeing the inconsistency not as intensity, but as manipulation. You start recognizing that the love you're fighting for is really a reflection of the love you never received when you needed it most. And with that clarity, the entire emotional cycle begins to loosen. The way people keep returning to someone who hurts them often has less to do with the person doing the harming and more to do with how our brains are wired to respond to unpredictability. When someone gives affection inconsistently, It creates a pattern called intermittent reinforcement, which is the same principle casinos use to keep people gambling. Your brain doesn't receive a steady flow of reward. It gets tiny, unpredictable bursts. Each moment of kindness or attention after a period of neglect feels extraordinarily powerful because it breaks the tension and releases a flood of dopamine. Your mind starts associating pain and pleasure in a way that is deeply compelling, even if you consciously know the relationship is damaging. Toxic people often exploit this natural wiring without even thinking about it consciously. Their behavior, pulling away, being cold, then suddenly warm, triggers a survival instinct in you. You become hyper-focused on reading their moods, trying to anticipate what will happen next, and desperately seeking the next reward of validation. That need for approval is rooted in your early experiences. If love as a child was conditional, given only when you behaved a certain way, performed well, or withheld your true self, your brain learned to associate approval with effort and pain with loss. That same pattern repeats in adulthood. You start believing that love is something to earn, not something freely given, and you cling to people who make you feel that familiar tension. The most dangerous part of this pattern is that it feels like choice, but it's not fully conscious. You tell yourself, I stay because I love them, or I can change them, when in reality your brain has been conditioned to seek their approval and tolerate pain in exchange for it. Every small moment of connection after a period of distance feels like a victory. It gives your brain the illusion of control, as if you've earned the love and recognition that was once missing. That sense of accomplishment is addictive because it temporarily repairs the invisible wounds left from early life. But the relief is always temporary because the cycle was never designed to end in lasting satisfaction. Your emotions become a roller coaster, and your reasoning collapses under the weight of high-stakes emotional activation. Logical thinking seems impossible when your nervous system is flooded with stress hormones and pleasure chemicals simultaneously. That is why even when you see the relationship is toxic, your body resists leaving. Your brain equates the pain with intensity and intensity with love. You're not weak. You're biologically hardwired to respond to these extremes, and it takes awareness to disrupt the pattern. This cycle also reshapes your sense of self. Over time, you internalize the idea that your worth depends on how much pain you can endure or how much effort you put into maintaining the connection. Self-abandonment becomes second nature. Your own needs are placed on the back burner because keeping the bond alive feels more urgent than protecting yourself. Your identity starts to fuse with the drama of the relationship. You no longer just love someone. You need them to feel alive, even if the relationship continuously chips away at your well-being. Recognizing this process is the first step toward freedom. Understanding that the addictive patterns of intermittent reinforcement and the constant search for validation are rooted in both your early emotional conditioning and your brain chemistry allows you to separate yourself from blame. It's not a moral failing. It's a survival strategy that was activated under stress. By identifying the ways you've been manipulated, intentionally or not, you start reclaiming power over your emotions. You learn that the intensity you crave can be found in healthy ways that don't cost you your sense of self or peace of mind. This chapter is about seeing the invisible puppeteer behind the emotional chaos, the subtle reward and punishment cycles that keep you hooked. Once you understand it, you can begin to rebuild boundaries, retrain your nervous system, and recognize that emotional highs from intermittent affection are not evidence of love, but evidence of a pattern that has trapped you. Awareness becomes the tool that transforms attachment from a form of bondage into a starting point for healing. Even when you know that someone is harming you, there is a part of you that seems to choose them anyway. That part isn't illogical or broken. It's deeply human, shaped by years of experience and internalized patterns. Inside each of us exists a shadow self, a collection of unresolved wounds, unmet needs, and subconscious beliefs that influence our behavior more than we realize. When you stay attached to someone who hurts you, it's often this shadow self at work. It's the part of you that still believes love must be earned, that comfort comes through suffering, and that your worth is tied to how much pain you can endure for someone else. From early childhood, many people receive messages that affection is conditional. You may have learned that love depended on behaving a certain way, meeting expectations, or avoiding mistakes. Those lessons become internalized rules. I have to be perfect to be loved, or if I please others, I'll be safe. These rules are stored in your subconscious, influencing your choices long after the people who taught them are gone. When an adult enters your life who behaves unpredictably, sometimes warm, sometimes distant, your shadow self recognizes a familiar rhythm. The relationship mirrors the old patterns you learned, and your brain interprets it as a continuation of what you already know. It doesn't feel safe or secure, but it feels known. This is why people often stay in toxic relationships even when they consciously want to leave. There is a magnetic pull toward what feels familiar, even if that familiarity is painful. It's not just about attraction to another person. It's about attraction to a dynamic your mind and body already understand. Pain becomes the language of connection, and your shadow self equates struggle with intimacy. The harder the emotional turmoil, the more it feels like love has been earned. The part of you that wants safety is in conflict with the part of you that seeks validation through endurance. This inner tug of war can be exhausting, confusing, and deeply frustrating, but it's also predictable once you understand the mechanisms behind it. Another aspect of the shadow self is the way it reinforces self-abandonment. When you prioritize someone else's behavior or emotions over your own, you effectively train yourself to accept mistreatment as normal. You start rationalizing their harmful actions, minimizing your own pain, or blaming yourself for their behavior. This self-abandonment becomes a subconscious survival strategy. By tolerating mistreatment, you maintain the illusion of connection, which your mind interprets as necessary for emotional survival. The more you engage in this, the more entrenched the pattern becomes. The shadow self also contains the part of you that still hopes for resolution or redemption. You might convince yourself that if you stay long enough, if you try harder, or if you understand them better, the person will change. This hope is powerful because it taps into a deep longing for wholeness, the desire to rewrite your own emotional history by fixing the past and the present. Unfortunately, this desire often keeps people trapped in cycles that repeat old trauma rather than healing it. Understanding the role of your shadow self is liberating because it removes the illusion of randomness. You begin to see that the pull toward toxic people is not weakness, stupidity, or bad luck. It is a complex interplay of learned survival strategies, unmet needs, and emotional conditioning. Once you recognize the patterns, you can start to separate your true self from the part that clings to pain. This is where choice re-enters the picture. Awareness gives you the ability to say no to old patterns, to honor your own needs, and to create boundaries that protect your emotional health. Healing from attachment to someone who hurts you requires acknowledging the shadow self without judgment. You need to understand it, not fight it. By bringing these unconscious drives into consciousness, you can start redirecting your energy toward relationships that are nourishing rather than harmful. The goal is not to eliminate the shadow, because it is part of you, but to integrate it, learn from it, and prevent it from dictating your relationships in ways that perpetuate suffering. Ending a toxic attachment is rarely simple, because your emotions are intertwined with old patterns that feel familiar and necessary. When you feel addicted to someone who hurts you, It's not just about missing them. It's about your nervous system craving the highs and lows you've learned to associate with connection. Breaking free requires more than just telling yourself to leave. It requires a deliberate process of retraining your mind, body, and emotions to respond differently and to recognize what genuine love and safety feel like. The first step is recognizing the difference between trauma bonds and real intimacy. Trauma bonds are formed through cycles of pain and relief, inconsistency, and manipulation, while healthy love is consistent, supportive, and nurturing. Pay attention to patterns rather than isolated moments. One warm gesture doesn't erase repeated harm. Notice whether the person's actions create security or anxiety, calm or tension. Awareness alone is powerful because it gives you the ability to see the relationship for what it is, rather than what you hope it could be. Next, it's essential to establish boundaries. Boundaries are not punishment. They are a form of self-respect and a signal to your nervous system that your well-being matters. Start with small steps. Limit contact, protect your personal space, and clarify your needs. Boundaries retrain your brain by creating a consistent environment where safety is prioritized over drama. Each boundary you maintain weakens the old patterns of attachment, signaling to your subconscious that stability, not chaos, is now the norm. Emotional regulation is equally important. Trauma bonds often keep the brain in a state of constant arousal. Stress hormones flood your system during conflict, followed by dopamine surges during moments of attention or affection. Mindfulness practices, deep breathing, journaling, and physical movement help your body release these chemicals safely. When your nervous system becomes calmer, it is easier to make rational decisions rather than being swept away by emotional highs and lows. You begin to notice that intensity is not love, and that calm, predictable interactions are actually more nourishing. Another key step is healing the internal wounds that first attracted you to harmful patterns. Often, people stay attached because they are unconsciously trying to resolve old trauma. Therapy, self-reflection, or even guided exercises in self-compassion allow you to meet those unmet needs internally rather than seeking them externally. As you heal, the gravitational pull toward people who mirror old pain diminishes. You stop confusing familiarity with attachment and start valuing relationships that genuinely respect and care for you. Support systems play a crucial role in this process. Friends, family, mentors, or therapists can act as external mirrors, helping you see patterns you may be blind to. Isolation makes it easier to fall back into old cycles because there is no external reinforcement of your growth. Sharing your experiences with trusted individuals provides both validation and accountability, making it easier to maintain distance from those who harm you. Finally, ending the attachment is also about reclaiming your sense of identity. When you've been attached to someone harmful, you may have shaped your sense of self around their presence, constantly adjusting, anticipating, or pleasing. Freeing yourself allows you to reconnect with your values, passions, and desires independent of their influence. You learn that your worth is inherent, not dependent on someone's approval or inconsistent affection. This chapter is about taking control, step by step, over the cycle that has kept you trapped. It's about replacing chaos with consistency, confusion with clarity, and dependency with self-respect. Breaking free isn't instantaneous, but with awareness, boundaries, emotional regulation, healing, support, and self-reclamation, the bond that once felt unbreakable gradually loosens. Over time, you learn to respond to relationships from a place of choice rather than compulsion, and you discover that love does not have to hurt to be real. This is where transformation begins, the point at which you realize that leaving a toxic attachment is not loss. It is the beginning of reclaiming your life, your peace, and your power. By the time you reach this point, you have seen clearly how your attachments were shaped, why you were drawn to pain, and how the patterns of your shadow self and trauma bonds kept you trapped. But awareness alone is not enough to create lasting change. The fifth step is transformation, the process of rebuilding yourself from the inside out so that your future relationships are rooted in choice, peace, and self-respect rather than habit, fear, or old pain. Transformation begins with self-compassion. Many people caught in toxic attachments blame themselves for staying, for hoping, or for believing they could change someone. But self-blame reinforces the very patterns that cause suffering. You were doing what your mind and body were wired to do, seeking safety, validation, and connection, even when it hurt. Recognizing this allows you to treat yourself with the kindness you were denied in the past. Self-compassion is not indulgence, it's repair. It's the internal safety net your nervous system lacked as a child, and it is the foundation of all healing. Next comes the practice of conscious reflection. Look at your past relationships and honestly map out the patterns where you felt anxious, abandoned, or desperate for approval. Notice the moments you rationalized mistreatment or ignored your own needs. By examining these moments without judgment, you separate yourself from them. You see that your choices were influenced by learned survival strategies, not inherent flaws. Writing exercises, journaling, or even talking with a therapist can help externalize these patterns so they lose power over your subconscious mind. Building emotional literacy is the next key step. Learn to identify your feelings before they drive your actions. When you feel anxious, lonely, or panicked in a relationship, pause and ask yourself, am I reacting to the present or to a memory of the past? By naming and labeling your emotions, you create a space between stimulus and response. That space is freedom. It allows you to choose boundaries, decide when to engage or disengage, and prevent the old trauma loop from controlling your behavior. Over time, this practice rewires your nervous system to prioritize calm, clarity, and self-respect over chaos and attachment to harm. Another critical part of transformation is rewriting your internal narrative. Many people who stay attached to harmful individuals carry beliefs like, I am not enough, or love requires suffering. These beliefs become self-fulfilling prophecies until they are challenged and replaced. Affirmations alone are not enough. You must actively practice living in ways that contradict these old beliefs. For example, prioritizing your needs, saying no without guilt, seeking connections that feel safe, and rewarding yourself for moments of self-respect all reinforce a new story. One in which you are worthy of love that is consistent, nurturing, and life-affirming. Integration is also essential. This means taking the lessons from previous chapters, the understanding of trauma bonds, intermittent reinforcement, the shadow self, and boundaries, and applying them consciously in your daily life. Practice noticing early signs of unhealthy patterns in new relationships, and intervene before attachment forms out of fear or compulsion. Celebrate your progress when you resist old impulses to chase someone who hurts you. These moments, small as they may seem, are proof that you are reclaiming autonomy over your emotions. Finally, transformation involves envisioning the kind of life and relationships you truly want. Picture yourself interacting with others from a place of calm security rather than frantic attachment. Imagine your future relationships filled with respect, honesty, and mutual care. When you hold this vision consistently, your mind and nervous system begin to orient toward it, making it more likely to manifest in reality. Transformation is not a single event. It is a continuous process of awareness, practice, and conscious living.